Welcome back to Movies TV Mad. I'm Mick, your host with the most. Just ask your girlfriends, wives, and especially your boyfriends and your husbands. A very warm welcome to Friday's edition of the dceu Daily. You can follow me on X, Twitter at Movies TV Mad, and on Instagram and on Threads at Movies TV Mad X, on Snapchat BMouth60, and on TikTok Mad Mickey's World. So a very warm welcome to Friday's edition of the dceu Daily. Today, I want to talk about the pros and cons of the prospective potential Warner Brothers Discovery sale. I want to educate you around this sale and what it could mean, because there's a lot of misinformation already online about this prospective sale. People who need your clicks and likes and views are treating this like a movie rumour. Oh, it could go here. It could go there. It could go fucking everywhere. Do you get me? Also, I want to talk about James Gunn's DCU and what a lie it was, what a fabrication it was from the very beginning. But let's educate you about this prospective, potential Warner Brothers Discovery sale. You've got to understand one thing, that this may not be a sale. The whole company may not be sold to another company. I've pre-warned you before that they may cut every part of this company and sell it off in bits and pieces. For example, DC Comics, which is what this platform and my audience are most interested in, could be sold to a company separately. For example, Disney isn't being discussed a lot, as I mentioned yesterday, which I find very scary, because when they're not talking about a certain company in this situation, is it because something is happening behind the scenes? Disney would absolutely find buying DC Comics very attractive. The potential of crossing over DC Comics movies and streaming shows with Marvel Cinematic Universe streaming shows and movies has a lot of potential with Disney and Marvel Studios, because they found themselves at a somewhat roadblock, traffic jam. They're not making money from their MCU movies and streaming content any longer. The MCU isn't the success it once was. We know how fucking lazy modern day entertainment is. And we know how fanboys and fangirls are obsessed with cameos and Easter eggs, right? And appearances. I mean, some of you, people who love cape shit, would gobble this up. I wouldn't. If Disney were to buy DC Comics, it would be a depressing realization that Gunn would probably remain as co-CEO of DC Studios, and probably Kevin Feige would replace Peter Safran as the other CEO of DC Studios. But they would be a combined entity, DC Studios and Marvel Studios. So there's no way Snyder is ever going to work with Disney. They wouldn't work with him, and he's said a long time ago he wouldn't want to work with Disney. So that would not happen. So for Snyder fans, this would be an utter disaster. But as I keep on saying, it's not what we want that matters, because, well, it matters what we want, but we can't control the final resolution of this Warner Brothers Discovery sale. So be very well aware that the whole of Warner Brothers Discovery may not be sold as a whole entity to another company. What are the companies we really don't want, including Disney, don't want WB Discovery or DC Comics to go to? And which ones would be more preferable? I think it's pretty obvious. At first, I was all for Paramount buying WB Discovery up, but when I did a little bit more investigating, and let's just say where they are politically and in the world and their thoughts and opinions, I don't want WB Discovery going to Paramount Blue Sky. I think this would be the worst thing ever. We now know that they've had three failed bids for the company. But not only that, they offered the disaster, that is David Zaslav, a co-CEO credit at the brand new company once they swallow it up. We don't want Zaslav anywhere near DC or WB any longer. Again, it could be a reality with Zaslav on board at Paramount that Gunn also keeps his position. There have been rumours that Paramount would dethrone James Gunn as co-CEO of DC Studios. But again, this is what I've got to warn you about. These are just rumours. If Zaslav remains in power, I can't see him removing his bro, James Gunn. But if he's a good businessman, he would. Because James Gunn has added no value to DC streaming and DC film. They're the facts, whether you want to hear those facts or not. We do not want Warner Brothers Discovery being sold to Paramount Pictures. Then there's Universal Comcast. Now, I actually quite like Universal Comcast. I think they're a very good company. They're the biggest studio in the world. They've replaced Disney as the most successful studio in the world, and they make some good things. Not everything they do is good. All right, yeah, but I like them, and I like the way they bought the Illumination Animation Studio and have allowed them to do what they're doing. I've always been a big fan of Illumination. You know, they make the Despicable Me movies and stuff like that, so big fan of Illumination. They're doing very well in partnership with Comcast and Universal. I wouldn't be opposed to Warner Brothers Discovery being bought out or DC Comics being bought by Universal Comcast. I think they're okay. Look, they're not perfect. We know that. Then there's Netflix. The Snyder fans really, really want Warner Brothers Discovery, or at the very least DC Comics, to be sold to Netflix. They seem to have this idea that the most realistic chance of the Snyderverse being restored is by Netflix acquiring either DC Comics or the whole of Warner Brothers Discovery. Why did they get this idea? Because Zack has been working with Netflix. The Rebel Moon movies were made with conjuncture with Netflix, and he's made other stuff like Army of the Dead with Netflix. They seem to like Zack, but I still don't trust Netflix. There's something at the back of my mind that doesn't trust Netflix. What I would say to the Snyder fans about Netflix, it's a very dangerous assumption to make just because Netflix buy DC Comics or Warner Brothers Discovery as a whole, that it's a foregone conclusion that the Snyderverse is restored. I don't trust Netflix. Don't ask me why. Then there's Apple TV. Now, I'm a big fan of the way Apple have done things. Interestingly, they've had a lot of co-productions recently with Warner Brothers Discovery. So that's interesting. There's a very good relationship already between WBD and Apple. I like Apple because they throw money at talented people and don't interfere with their artistic integrity. So if the Snyderverse was to be restored at Apple, it would be a good, healthier place for Zack to work at. Don't forget that Netflix interfered with both those Rebel Moon movies by insisting that Zack release a 2-hour cut, then a director's cut. The problem is the 2-hour cuts were released before Zack's proper vision of those movies. So people were having they were seeing a false version of these movies. They weren't seeing Zack's complete vision. What should have happened was maybe if you could release the full cut before the 2-hour cut. But the problem is, the reason they wanted the 2-hour cuts because they thought nobody would sit there and watch these long cuts. But you know, how many times have you watched a movie on Netflix and watched it in bits and pieces, right? Because they let you continue where you left off. So does it really matter? So I don't like the fact that they made Zack edit these 2-hour versions of both Rebel Moon movies, because I think that really hurt both movies. So again, I don't trust Netflix, but I really do trust Apple TV. I like Apple TV, and I like the way they do things. So I think Apple TV and Universal Comcast would be the two best places for Warner Brothers Discovery or DC Comics. As I said earlier, it's not up to me, it's not up to you, but they're my personal preferences. Whoever tells you they know where this company is going doesn't. I've seen on X Twitter a lot of Snyder fans making the assumption it is foregone conclusion that it's already been decided it's going to Netflix. That might be the case. The simple fact of the matter is we simply don't know. And I would never misinform you about this situation. I don't have a clue who's going to buy DC Comics or Warner Brothers Discovery as a whole. But be very much aware that this is going to be a long, very long, confusing, toxic journey. There's already rumours of aggressive takeovers, which is going to be a very, very long, protracted situation. But yeah, if it was up to me, Apple and Universal Comcast would be my preferred destinations for DC Comics or Warner Brothers Discovery as a whole. I want to spend the rest of this video talking about the Snyderverse, the potential of the Snyderverse, but first of all I want to talk about the Snyderverse fandom. It's a very, very interesting fandom. Some of these fans were never movie fans, didn't watch TV, film, but there was something about what Zack was building at the DCEU that really excited them. And suddenly they were loving these movies, even though they weren't that interested in films before. It's interesting, isn't it? I speak to so many Snyder fans on social media. Mostly, my experience of that is very, very positive. Some wonderful people. There's some people who are Snyder fans who I don't agree with politically, but I ignore all of that. Because, again, I'm a guy, I'm a balanced guy, I'm not insane, who likes to agree to disagree with people. But yeah, most of my experiences with Snyder fans have been positive. There's been those times when they've gone after Christopher Reeve and Superman 78, where we've argued, and with those people, the experiences haven't been great. There's sometimes they've said stuff I don't agree with, and sometimes we've clashed. But my, 99.9% of the time, I have a good experience and relationship with Snyder fans. They love Zack Snyder, and they love his movies, and there's nothing wrong with that. They've been accused of being a toxic fandom, but you've got to understand, I'm going to give you an analogy here. In Batman 89, the Joker says that Batman made him because he threw him in the vat of acid. And it's very similar to the Snyder fans. When Batman vs Superman was released and the discourse started, to admit you love Batman vs Superman, and I know this because I admitted loving Batman vs Superman, you would get mocked and bullied by people. So what happens is, if you keep on kicking someone or throwing them in a vat of acid, they're going to become that thing that you accused them of. They were being mocked and bullied for simply loving a movie. And that was wrong. Let's talk about the potential of the Snyderverse. The potential it originally had, first of all. Zack Snyder and Christopher Nolan and David Goyer had an interesting take on Superman. A really interesting take on Superman. It was very, very, very modern. It wasn't going to be nostalgic. It wasn't going to be like the Christopher Reeve movies. Neither should a modern day Superman movie just copy what Dick Donner did. That was great. First movie I ever saw. Love it. Still watch it and love it. But there was originality to Man of Steel. It was a movie set in these darker times that we live in. Times that have got this threat of terrorism and negativity. And Superman, in Zack's movies, is treated with a lot more disdain, a lot more mistrust, because it was a modern contemporary movie saying, what if this really happened? What if Superman was real? And that was very interesting. And for some people, they just didn't like it. But that franchise had so much potential because Zack Snyder uses CGI as a paintbrush. And the storytelling, the visual storytelling is beautiful. And the people writing the movies with him and for him have got great ideas. So the potential was there. His casting was fantastic. Now, does the Snyderverse have potential to continue? Yes. And there's many parameters with that. Zack Snyder's big dream is to make a Dark Knight Returns movie. As I've discussed before, I'd like to see a two-part movie, a two-part Dark Knight Returns movie. I believe that Batman vs Superman should have been the Dark Knight Returns because ultimately that was really the story that Snyder wanted to tell. Snyder's a fan of this, deconstructive comic books. That's what he's a fan of. That's what he likes. They're the stories he likes to tell. There's nothing wrong with that. Batman vs Superman is deconstructing Batman vs Superman to reconstruct them. And that's a great thing. That's a great tool to use in storytelling. You deconstruct them, you build them down, and then you build them back up. It's a bit like Superman 3, when Clark's fighting evil Superman. And he beats evil Superman, and he opens his shirt, and he's Superman again. That's ultimate deconstruction to reconstruction, right? And it's a very powerful thing to do. So there's lots of potential for the Snyderverse to be restored. You only need a studio or a company that sees the potential in Zack Snyder's art. And finally today, let's talk about James Gunn's DCU. James Gunn's DCU was nothing but a lie and a facade. There was very little truth to what he was alleging he was attempting to build. No Brave and the Bold, Swamp Thing by James Mangold was an utter lie. These two films were never gonna happen. The announcement of Andy Muschietti directing Brave and the Bold was the biggest of lies to create hype for the Flash movie. As we've already said, that didn't work. We've now got Muschietti saying he can't talk about that movie right now, but in a few months he'll be able to talk about that movie. It's clear they're going to tell us in a few months that that movie's not happening because they'll be in a position in a few months where probably James Gunn's been fired and the direction will be different. So it was nothing but a lie. We've had Creature Commandos. That wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great. It was okay. But it only attracted certain members of the audience. Not good enough. And then you had Superman, which made 615 million globally, if you believe their estimations and figures. Again, that's a solid figure, but because of the budget and the marketing, it didn't work. It didn't make a profit. I don't like the movie. I think it sets up some interesting themes, but the execution of that film as a film simply doesn't work. Next year, we're supposed to be getting, and I'm not sure if we will get these, Supergirl and Lanterns, right? That's the future of the DCU, right? And there's an R-rated movie that the title escapes me right now. That's also supposed to be coming, right? Will we ever see this stuff? Well, Supergirl has been shot, hasn't it? Lanterns has been shot. The R-rated movie has been shot. But will we ever see them? Because the problem is, not enough people are interested in James Gunn's DCU. But most of that slate was a lie. A blatant lie. So, are you excited about Supergirl after you saw her pissed and abusing her cousin Superman? Are you excited to see more of that? Because I'm not. And not many people are. It's crazy that we had 16 or 17 DCEU movies, whatever you think of that franchise. And we've had, what we had? A couple of projects, 3 projects, Peacemaker 2 included. It's crazy, isn't it, as well, that we've got a portion of the DCEU that happens to be part of what Gunn was doing at the DCEU, then mixed up with a new type of franchise. But he announced all these projects. He dragged the media to a press call to tell them that a lot of these projects were on the back burner. The truth is, The Authority was another one he was excited about that's not happening. That's on the back burner. The truth is, a lot of these projects were never going to happen. Booster Gold is another one that supposedly is on a back burner, but he's hinted about that. But you can't trust a word this guy Gunn says. For me, he's just a confidence man. He's just a con artist. He's just a trickster. The motivations of doing those interviews with Boba Talks and Emergency Awesome and those rock stars, what's that YouTube channel called? Rock stars, and I think one of them already does stuff for DC officially. So it's all very crooked because Access Media won't take James Gunn seriously anymore, so he has to go to these amateurs, these amateur cheerleaders, to talk to him because no respectable journalist will give him any airtime because they know he's a fucking liar. It was interesting to me to see Boba Talks asking him about the future of the DCU. And I'm thinking, Boba, we know there's no future. He knows, the man you're asking about the future knows there's no future. There's no future. Clayface is the R-rated movie I was referring to earlier. On the outside, yeah, Clayface movie, R-rated, could be fun. But the problem is, he's giving notes on all of these movies. He rewrote and reshot The Flash. We saw what a disaster that fucking movie was. He interfered and gave notes to James Wan for Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. This man is absolutely not the right person to run DC. You know, the proof is in the taste of the pudding. So today I've drawn you a picture of what could happen via the sale and what may not happen via the sale. The Warner Brothers Discovery may sell all their assets in bits and pieces. This, my friends, is the end of Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers Pictures. A company started off by two brothers with a vision to entertain the world, to distract the world from their problems, because this was what entertainment was. The pioneering Looney Tunes. And so many great movies. It was funny yesterday, Variety was saying, if Warner Brothers doesn't exist, we don't get all these directors getting artistic integrity. Oh, the irony. And what film did they mention? Fucking Barbie. Warner Brothers were the studio who fucking distributed JFK by Oliver Stone. Such a controversial movie that its star Kevin Costner and director Oliver Stone had death threats not to make that movie, but Warner Brothers then were brave enough to allow Stone to make his controversial movie. And it was amazing. JFK changed everything for me, my mentality as a young man and how I saw the world. That's what Warner Brothers used to be. Then Warner Brothers became this place that drove artists who wanted to make something a little bit different. So don't fucking tell me how modern day Warner Brothers support the auteur, and you can't trust Variety. Variety are the Moscow fucking Bugle. They're the mouthpiece of Warner Brothers, just like the Radio Times is the mouthpiece for everything BBC. You can't trust Access Media. The DCU is toast. Warner Brothers is about to be gobbled up and swallowed up. And that, my friends, makes me very, very sad. But unfortunately, the mismanagement of this studio and English-speaking Western entertainment in general has brought us to this. Warner Brothers are the first of many to be bought out. It's happened with Paramount, and they've been bought up by a big tech business person. So AI, here we come. They're going to destroy entertainment with artificial intelligence now. They're thinking to themselves, Oh, nobody watches films and TV because we can't make great films and TV. What should we do? I know how to solve the problem. Artificial intelligence. Because it's cheaper. Not because it's better, because it's cheaper. That's the only mentality. The wrong people at the wrong time are running entertainment.